Bledsoe was arrested.
Patrick Montgomery was in court.
Jonathan Manapa will stay in federal custody.
No, I don't take responsibility at all.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. So 42-year-old Texas resident Kyle McMahon was an active duty Marine when he went to the Ellipse to watch Donald Trump's speech on January 6th. He refused to hand over his backpack to security though, so he headed straight to the Capitol. Now, according to the prosecutor, McMahon didn't have weapons in the backpack, but what he did have was a gas mask, he had a helmet, and he had first aid supplies. So, you know what every peaceful tourist of the Capitol takes with them. So McMahon arrived at the Capitol together long before the rest of the mob. He ended up waiting. By 2 p.m., there was a large group that formed and started to push the barricades against the police, and then they started to pull them away. So as the police line collapsed, McMahon grabbed one of the barricades and he moved it out of the way so that people would have easier access to the Capitol grounds. From there, McMahon maneuvered to the front of a crowd that had gathered on the steps on the east side of the Capitol, and the police had formed a new line at this location, and McMahon was right up front. He was pushing on the police and on the barricades, along with everybody else, but he was definitely pushing. And it wasn't long before the mob overran this new police line. And so McMahon was seen at the top of the steps. He was celebrating, he was pumping his fist in the air. Then he moved to the rotunda doors and he started pushing against an officer who was trying to keep everyone out. So the officer pushed McMahon back, and McMahon retaliated by forcefully pushing the officer. And then he leaned his upper body into this officer. So McMahon remained in this location, confronting the police for about 30 minutes. And then even when the police deployed pepper spray into the crowd, he stayed there. Now, eventually, the mob forced those doors open, so he pushed past a bunch of the outnumbered officers. McMahon illegally entered the building at that point, along with a lot of other people. He headed into the rotunda, and then he joined a group that had moved over to the old Senate chamber. So McMahon and the mob were stopped. They were police in a hallway just outside of the chamber, and he was watching as other people were pushing against these officers. Then he was heard yelling, quote, "We need shields and spray." After a while, though, McMahon left this area. He walked back to the rotunda, and then a large group of police entered the room. They were trying to clear it, and McMahon was gesturing for other people to move toward the police. Then he approached one officer, and he said, with a straight face, I presume, quote, "Listen, we don't want to hurt any of you." Okay. He then started to advance toward another distracted officer. So the first officer stopped him. Well, at that point, McMahon grabbed the officer's hand, and the officer had to rip his hand and his arm away from him. A few minutes after that, McMahon joined a group that was pushing against the police. McMahon pushed on the back of another person. He was lending his weight against these officers. He finally stopped when the police in this area deployed pepper spray. But the rest of the mob got even more amped up at this point. They started attacking the police. McMahon, though, he headed for a different location in the rotunda, and then there was an entrance. This is a round room, and there's all these alcoves and all of these hallways, all of these doorways leading to hallways leading to other parts of the building. So he headed over to an area where there's another doorway and an entrance leading to other parts of the Capitol. And he was gesturing for other people to follow him over there. So some officers were standing in that doorway, and McMahon moved toward one of them and he pushed the officer's arm. And then another officer tried to move McMahon back, and McMahon knocked that officer's arm away with his forearm. So a group of officers then surrounded McMahon and the other people that were with him, and they tried to move them toward an exit. And when McMahon saw an officer trying to remove another man in this area, McMahon grabbed the officer's arm. And so then a shouting match ensued. The officers repeatedly screaming, "Get off of me." McMahon is repeatedly screaming, "Don't fucking touch him." Eventually, McMahon was forced out of the rotunda. But again, he prevented officers from doing their job. So he walked out of the room, but he was still in the building, and he walked over toward the rotunda doors that lead to the exterior of the building, the ones he entered through. So as these police officers were trying to stop people from entering through these doors, McMahon grabbed one of them and pulled him away. So then McMahon turned to head back into the Capitol, and another officer tried to stop him. He's like, "No, you need to go." And so the officer placed his hand on McMahon's chest, and McMahon slapped that officer's hand away. So ultimately, he was expelled from the building. He remained on the Capitol grounds, though, for a while. And he was there until, by his own admission, until approximately 6:30 p.m. So following the Capitol attack, McMahon, of course, starts bragging about his crimes on social media. In a reply to someone's Facebook comment, McMahon wrote in part, quote, "I was there along with thousands of patriots. We, the people, are the ones that need to rid our government of corruption, abuse, and tyranny." And then McMahon also searched online, and he asked Google, quote, "Can I resign from the military if I do not want to serve an illegitimate president?" So McMahon was arrested on December 6th of 2023, and he was charged with civil disorder, assaulting officers, entering a restricted building or grounds, 2 counts of disorderly conduct, and parading or demonstrating in a Capitol building. In June of 2024, McMahon pleaded guilty to 1 assault charge, and he was looking at up to 8 years in prison, 3 years of probation, and $250,000 in fines. But the prosecutor requested a sentence of only 30 months in prison, 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and $2,000 in restitution. Surprisingly, this guy has no criminal history. He also has no history of mental illness, no drug or alcohol abuse, so very odd for this bunch. But prior to serving as a Marine, also, he was a staff sergeant in the Air Force Reserves. Now, as usual, the prosecutor pointed out, his military service is laudable, but he betrayed his oath to uphold the Constitution. And they said he put his personal and political feelings ahead of the country and ahead of his duty by not only being there, but also by trying to resign just because his particular candidate didn't win. So U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan presided over McMahon's case, and in the end, she sentenced him to only 19 months in prison, 1 year of probation, 100 hours of community service, and $2,000 in restitution. I'm not sure what's going on with Chutkan lately. She is usually much tougher than this. He absolutely deserved every bit of 30 months. He repeatedly put his hands on police officers. He repeatedly prevented them from doing their jobs that day. I don't get it. But anyway, I am thankful he's going to be locked up during this next election. I'm also thankful that this felony conviction that he now has is not going anywhere for a while. So anyway, I will let you know if I hear any more. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Please like, please share, and subscribe to the channel if you have not. If you can donate, truly appreciate it. Helps to keep the show going. Love you all. Take care. Talk with you soon.